So guys, we are here to talk about migration of workloads into Azure. And not just migration of the workloads. Once you migrate your workload into Azure, how does Microsoft provide you protection? Before we get into our presentation, a little bit about myself. I'm Rochak Mittal. I'm Principal PM with Azure Site Recovery Service, which is part of OMS. I've been with Microsoft for a little more than 11 years now, mostly working on enterprise workloads, enterprise topologies, with last 4 years working on site recovery. So I will kick off this presentation by starting a migration, not talking about it, but doing it live here. So I have a recovery services vault, and I have protected few virtual machines with it. I go to my replicated items, and I see I have a SharePoint and a WordPress being protected with it. For the demo purposes, I will do the migration of, or in fact, the testing of migration of this workload. It's very simple to do it. I select my machine. There's a button to do test. It tells me my machine is currently running on a VMware environment, which is my Ignite demo, and I'm replicating it into Azure. I would take the latest point in time and attach to a network, which I can specify here, and kick it off. This would start the process of testing the migration, where it will bring up the virtual machine in Azure. Obviously, this process is going to take some time, so we will continue with our presentation and come back and take a look at this migration in few minutes. So before we talk about migration, a little bit about Azure, public Azure. I think you have heard enough across the presentation, starting from Scott, where he showed how the power of Azure is helping so many enterprises take the hyperscale platform. Similarly, Corey talked about how it's being helped in AI technology. So I'm not going to spend too much time on what is Azure or what's the power of it, but I want you guys to take 3 points out of it. First, this is a global platform. We are across the data centers in 34 regions, which allows you to run the applications near to you, give the same performance which you are getting on your on-premise environments through those data centers, and meet the same bars which you have for your application. 2, it's a hyperscale environment. The way environments are changing today, our business requirements change not in months or years. It's changed on the basis of days. We can't plan the environments well in advance. We need capabilities where we can scale up or scale down in an order of minutes. That's the power which you get with the hyperscale environment of Azure. Third, all of you are more experienced than me here and know how difficult and costly it could be to manage data centers on your own, and especially when you have to just do it for small number of applications. So the third benefit you get by using public Azure is around the cost benefit, where it reduces the cost of running the infrastructure for you. Second thing, as I was talking about, that site recovery service is part of OMS. Part of OMS was also demoed in the keynote earlier this week. And the OMS is a platform which provides you management for your hybrid and public cloud, whether it's AWS or Azure. It also provides you security and protection. The key services in this is the log analytics and the insight service, the automation and the update services, backup services, site recovery service, the one which we'll be talking about more in detail, and the security and patching services. The idea behind OMS is to give you a complete management and security solution independent of which cloud you are working from. As we grow, we will have hybrid environment. Based on our needs, some applications will run on Hyper-V, some applications will run on VMware, some applications will run on Azure, some applications will run on AWS. No one of us are going to run all our application in one place. So you still need a management solution which can manage all of these environments together. Because if you don't have that, then the people managing these applications will have a challenging life. So the idea behind OMS is to give you a single pane of glass for all your environments, all your applications, and give you a consolidated management solution. And that's the journey we have embarked a few years back, and we will continuously improve and bring new capabilities around management in that. So for today's presentation, we will focus on site recovery. We have multiple sessions on OMS already being done throughout the week. Some of them are still to follow today and tomorrow. I have a detailed slide in the end, which you can refer back to take a look at if you want to go in any other session, or take a look at the slides at a later point of time. So what is site recovery? Firstly, I'm very proud to be associated with this service. I was one of the first members who started working on this. And the idea of site recovery was to give you a complete solution, not piecemeal, a complete solution for all your environments. So as you can see here in the slide, that site recovery provides you from VMware, Hyper-V, physical, AWS, or even Azure platform, replication for migration and DR into the public Azure. If you have your own data centers and you still want to migrate or DR between your data center, we provide you that capabilities as well. We understand because of some of your application compliance requirement perspective or some of your security requirement perspective, you may not want to use public Azure for all your application. But that doesn't mean that you will not use it. Maybe 70% of your applications are comfortable to go into Azure, and 30% is OK to be replicating into another data center. That's the same philosophy which I talked about in the last slide, giving you a single management across all of these. Now, the application environments are also growing. It's no longer just Windows application. There is Linux, which is also growing equally fast. So we also work across any OS platform, whether it's Windows or Linux, and allow you to manage those workloads running on those. So when we conceptualize site recovery, the goal of the site recovery was to democratize DR. What does that mean? Traditionally, DR is associated with a complex process, right? A costly process. So usually either application owners or admins avoid doing DR and just live with backup, which actually meets only 10 or 20% of their requirements. Or even if they implement it only for the topmost business critical applications. So when we thought about this space, we said the reason it's complicated and it's costly, people are not using it fully. They want to use it, but they are not able to use it. So we sat down and thought about few pillars for our service. The first one is simple and being cost effective. We don't want it to be a complicated process and being a cost effective. And how do we achieve that today? So we are the only service which is running truly on a public cloud, right? And providing a DR site for the public cloud. Today you would find many vendors talking about public cloud replication and DR, but what they are not doing is they are not running service fully as a multi-tenant service. They ask you to run some or the other part of infrastructure in the public cloud, which makes it difficult to manage. You have to manage that environment, requires it update, and it's a costly affair as well. Whereas ASR design point from the start is to have a multi-tenant services fully managed and maintained by Microsoft. So as a DR admin or IT admin who's using this service, you don't have to work with that hassle of managing this infrastructure. Our journey for simplification has been very great. We started, and you all would know that Azure started with a classic old portal and has moved to the new portal paradigm. We had a simplified experience even on the classic portal, but all through the last 3 years of learning, whatever learnings we had, we brought those learning and simplified the experience in the new Ibiza portal much further than that. In the last 8 months where we have given this portal to our customers, the feedback has been absolutely amazing about the simplification. The second principle we wanted to, the zero we started with, that we need to be heterogeneous. I've talked about in the last slide, but the point again was, if I have to democratize DR, I need to cater to all your requirements. I can't be doing the piecemeal part of it. Third, it's about convergence. In the market, there are a lot of companies which talk about data DR. What does that mean? They will move your data to the DR site, and that's the DR story for you, right? But does that help? The applications are in a VM which use this data and needs to have connectivity and other aspects of it. Some vendor came with the next step where they brought the virtual machines into the DR site. But whereas Microsoft, we actually look into a completely application-aware DR. What does that mean? That means that we will bring up your virtual machines, we will move your data, we will connect virtual machines and data, we will move the virtual machines config, we will have network configuration, and have the application running in the DR side in order of minutes. So it's not, again, a piecemeal solution, but it provides you a complete solution. And all of these capabilities are equally applicable in your migrations. When you are moving the applications, you just don't want to move the data. You want to move the application. Hence, all of these pillars are very relevant for your migration scenarios as well. Interestingly, recently Gartner did the analysis for their DRaaS quadrant. This is the 2016 DRaaS quadrant. And as you can see, Microsoft is being placed in the leader quadrant. This is the site recovery solution of the Microsoft, which has come into the leader quadrant. And if you look at what the analysts say and refer back to the 4 principles which I talked about in my previous slide, you would find straight relevance between those 4 principles and what analysts has highlighted into our service advantages. It talks about converged data and availability solutions. It talks about simple pricing and being cost effective. It talks about high feature innovation, which is towards our heterogeneous platform. And it talks about simple to use and manage. This analyst, or this report was really very close to my heart because the principles with which I started this service, I was able to see that has resonated with the analysts as well. So that's enough about site recovery, OMS, Azure. You all are here to talk about migration. So when you think about migration of applications, there are various constructs you think about. If I have to move my application, whether it's to public Azure or to any other platform, I would be worried about 3 things. 1, how do I move my application? How do I replicate my data? How do I replicate my application into another data center? If I have replicated the data, I will not be still confident that my application will continue to work the same way it's working today. Before I do the actual cutover, is there a capability by which I can test my migrations and ensure that I have tuned it to the right performance, I've tuned it to the right settings, and ensure that the application will work the same way, my customers will have the same experience. So that becomes your second consideration, is about testing. Third, applications are business critical. They mean business. They mean money. So if a migration process means a downtime, that straight away means a loss of revenue for you guys. So the third consideration everybody has from a migration perspective is, how do I reduce my downtime for production workload when I'm doing the actual migration? I hope this resonates with everyone here. This is what I would believe the top 3 considerations will everyone have with the migrations. Now, when you are using site recovery, what are the value props? Multiple environments, we talked about it enough. Any workload, Linux, Windows. So pretty much you are covered for all your requirements from an application perspective. The third one, no impact in migration testing. The demo which I started with, that's exactly the point here. What does that mean? My application is running on the production side. I've set up a continuous replication. So that means my data is moving across on a steady state basis. My production application is not impacted. So I've set up my first goal of moving the data. That has been set. Being a continuous replication, it's constantly making the changes and keeping the application up to date to the same place where your current production site is. So when I trigger a test migration, what it does, it brings up the virtual machines from the replicated copy without impacting your replication or your production site, and brings up in an isolated environment. It basically, you saw it took me an input of which network to connect it. That's what the isolated environment means. Now your application will come up in Azure or any other environment which you are using for migration, and there you can test it from a functionality perspective, you can test it from performance perspective or connectivity perspective, and that will provide you a test for your migration before doing the actual migration or taking your production downtime. Moving application with near zero downtime. And how do we achieve that? As I was talking about continuous replication, so your data is always there. So that let's say I have set up my replication on a Monday with a hindsight that I would replicate or move my application over the weekend. My application is in steady state. I've tested it over the weekend, and Saturday is the time frame where I've decided that I will move my application. How much downtime would I need? My data and my configuration is already in sync. I have tested my application, so I know what it needs to connect. So my downtime is purely the amount of time it takes for application to come up in Azure and to turn off my application on the primary side and route the DNS. Based on your experience, you all are knowledgeable enough that this activity of just booting up the application and configuring a network and final sign-off can be done just in a couple of hours on a weekend or over a outage period where you want to do the migrate. So pretty much, it's just a near zero downtime, and the downtime is towards just the application getting started. Third thing, for migration, we don't charge any licensing fee. And how does that work? We provide protection and replication for each workload for 31 days free. If you're using site recovery, no charges is charged for migration or for site recovery licenses for 31 days. Let's understand it a little bit more clearly. Let's say I have two applications. I start with application 1 and start the migration of it on day 0. So I have started the protection and replication on day 0. My application is replicating, and by day 31, I have replicated it and migrated it. No charges. For application 2, I started on day 20 or maybe day 32. 31 days from the time when I start for application 2, the license is free for that application from that day. So even if you are going application by application on a migration, you get 31 days slicing window for each application or each virtual machines. It's not just the first 31 days. It's not like how we provide trials for you. It's not for trial. It's truly, truly for using the migration without charging you any cost for the migration. I hope you guys have heard about hybrid use benefit that allows you to run Windows Service licenses in Azure which are covered under software assurance. ASR natively has integration with hybrid use benefit. So when you move the workloads with ASR, they will be under hybrid use benefit, and you don't need to pay any additional licensing cost if you are under software assurance. So with this, really, if you see, we have covered all the three considerations and also provided you more benefits when you are using site recovery for migration. So before we go back to our demo, let's also understand what it takes to set up that infrastructure and set up the VM into a state where it was already replicating. As you can see, I have my on-premise data center and Azure showcased here. All I need to go and do in Azure portal is to create a recovery services vault. That's what is the entry point to start using ASR service. It gives you a guided experience and asks you to install one component, only one component on your on-premise environment. What is this component for? This is basically a connector between your environment and Azure. As you select the virtual machines, we push the agent inside your virtual machines. So the VMs and the applications you are selecting for migration, you select them from our portal, and we push these agents into the virtual machines. Once the virtual machines agent has been pushed, it basically starts reading your writes and send the data across, again through the same connector which we have configured here from config and process server. This allows you to only have access given to one machine to the external network from your environment, as well as helps you to do the consolidation of your workloads, do the compression at a multi-workload level, and have your data moving in a steady state. After that, the failover operation, I have already shown you the UI, which is very simple, just to do the test migration or the migration actually and move your workloads into Azure. Now, I've been talking about what you can do, what you can do, what you can do. Is Microsoft using it, right? So Microsoft IT, which manages all of our infrastructure, is using this scenario for migration and DR. There are some numbers and some scenarios which I have mentioned here. They are using it to move their on-premise infrastructure, multi-thousand VM infrastructure already moving into Azure and the resource manager environment. They are using it for monitoring and migration of their reports, so it also provides them a complete solution. They are also using it for disaster recovery for the workloads which they are not able to migrate. And they are also using it for consolidation. They are mergers in companies. They are subscription consolidations. You are moving to a new data center as Azure moves in. So that's the same thing which MSIT is also doing. As their organization changes or a new data center comes in and they want to move their workloads between two Azure data centers, they use these technologies to move it. They started this journey earlier this year, around Jan-Feb timeframe. And the numbers for the first 90 days, right? First 90 days was more than 1,500 virtual machines they were able to migrate. Now, based on your experience, whatever technologies you would have used for migrations in the past, between two different environments from your on-premise to an Azure environment, I think 1,500 is a big number to be completed and be working out of a different environment in just 90 days. Based on this success, they have created a plan where they are moving more than 15,000 virtual machines between two data centers. So it's not just that Microsoft is giving you a solution which is not adopted by us. We are using the same technology for managing and maintaining our data center migrations as well. Some of the quotes from their directors, their service managers, just talks about the same 4 principles which we have been talking about: minimal downtime, simplified experience, works like magic. That's how it works. So that's all about migration. Let's go back and take a look at our virtual machine and also try to give you a walkthrough. How do you protect a virtual machine with that? So as you can see, this virtual machine which we triggered off, the job for that one was running. It's a test migration job. It actually, because it was a VMware environment, it had to do some conversions to be converted into an Azure environment. But within the 15 minutes time frame, your machine is ready and waiting for your testing. You can see that the job has paused on a step which is saying you have to complete user input. That basically means the machine is up and running and you can test that application. So let's go to our virtual machine tab. And the same VM which we protected, now you can see that the same VM is available as WordPress demo v-test. Because it's a test test migration, we have brought the virtual machine with a different name and appended test in the end of it. So I will click on this machine. And go to this network interfaces. And what I'm trying to do is basically set up the remote desktop for this virtual machine by adding a public IP to it, so that we can actually go and log into this virtual machine to see what's happening. So I will enable the public IP. I've already created a public IP with which I want to connect to it, and I will save that network interface. It's going to take about a minute to attach the network. But meantime, let me show you that if you have an application, the same experience can be also scripted and automated by a concept called recovery plan, and all of these steps can also be done as part of your migration process. So we'll come back to this VM by the time it's attached, and let's go back to our recovery services vault and look at that SharePoint which we had protected. And if I had to fail over a SharePoint, what would I do? So I had a SharePoint, and what we can do is create a recovery plan. And I have this SharePoint recovery plan. Let me just show you a customized view of this. Now, when you're doing an application, the things which would be of interesting is to bring up them as steps, where if they have dependencies amongst each other, you can tie them all together and bring them as an application where your DB tier is coming first, followed by your application tier or your web tier. If you wanted to add a step for scripts, you could have done that by adding a post action or a pre-action. And here we integrate with our other sister OMS service, where we talk about automation and allow you to attach a script with that. So I can select my automation account and also select the runbooks which are available in that, and just save this. This will basically attach the script in the end, and you can do the failover, and that script of IP which we did can also be automated in itself. Let's go back to that VM where the network interface is also set up now. And this time, I would actually connect to this virtual machine. I hope I will type the password correct in the one go. And as you can see now, the virtual machine which is running in Azure is getting connected. Our network seems to be pretty slow with 23,000 people connecting to the same network. And if I open my local explorer, and let it load, it would basically load my WordPress website, where I have hosted a single page which basically talks about our Gartner report and Gartner analysis. So this way, you basically are moving your application, and within 15 minutes, right in front of you, we are able to test our application, connect to it, work through it, and do everything. And if you have a more complicated multi-tier application, then you can go into a recovery plan, do a SharePoint kind of a recovery, and bring the application up. So let's move back to our next step, and I think where most of you guys would be interested, because this functionality of migration has been there for a little more than a year now. Now, once you are in Azure, does your BCDR requirements change? What do you guys think? Do you still have some business continuity and DR requirements? Quick show of hand, how many people feel they will have their DR requirements? Okay, not many. Let's look at it. Why would you have a BCDR requirements? So primarily, BCDR for an application is driven through compliance and certification. It's driven by the certifications like FedRAMP, ISO, HIPAA, which requires us to have a backup and DER, a business continuity process in place. That's the primary reason why we need to think about having a DR or a backup strategy for our applications. Second thing, even if you are using a hyperscale platform, your human errors are not going to go away. Yes, we can be as careful as we can, but we will have our fat finger deletes, we will have our software bugs, and we need protection against that. We can be in a very secure environment, but attacks like ransomware, attacks like malware, virus attacks still hits your application. We make mistakes which leaves the holes open, and these malicious users reach out to it. These are your primary reasons of needing a BCDR strategy when you are running in Azure. Yes, you will also get the benefit of doing the BCDR and get the regional outage coverage and resiliency against the infrastructure failures if they happen in unforeseen scenarios. So for these 4 reasons, we all need to think for our application a BCDR strategy, invariably which platform they are running on, whether they are running on private cloud or public cloud. So last year, in Ignite, we gave you Azure ISVM backup, and we have enhanced it from that Ignite to now, where we have gone through GA, and today we have multi-thousand virtual machines by all of you being protected by that. And the kind of capabilities in backup we provide you is, this backup is seamless. You don't need any other infrastructure. It's also built on the same PaaS infrastructure or the same PaaS paradigm which we talked about for the site recovery. It also allows you to have a self-service backup and restore. It allows you to get application consistent snapshot. It allows you to not just do the data backup, but do a complete VM backup and restore your virtual machines and VHD completely. And obviously, as we took the journey of the new portal, even in Azure Backup, we simplified our management and monitoring experience. We earlier this week had a detailed session on this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I still wanted to recall back that last year we gave you backup. And this year, we are giving you a sneak preview. This is still not out, but we wanted to take this opportunity and showcase to you the functionality we are working for, which is called DR for Azure IS. This is going to be powered by site recovery services, and today, first time, I will do a full demo of it. In earlier sessions, we gave you a sneak preview of it, but today we will spend a good amount of time, or rest of the time, talking about this topic. So let's also understand the DR needs. It might be evident to you guys, but I still want to call out very clearly that what are the DR needs. We have been speaking to about 100 enterprises as part of our exercise when we started building on this, and these were the 4 key pillars which came out when we spoke to enterprises. I need DR protection for compliance needs. I need the ability to fail over application based on my own business decisions. I don't want somebody else to decide when I will do failover. I might have 5 applications, and 5 of them can have different business decisions, and I should be able to replicate, protect, fail over them based on my business requirements. Some application can be critical enough that I can't sustain a 1-hour outage. Some applications might be less important. I'm OK to have a 4-hour outage. So I want to plan and protect and make sure I have a business continuity based on my application requirement, not driven by someone else, because I have to get the compliance certification for application based on the business requirements of the application. Third, DR business is like insurance. You need to have confidence that that insurance will work when you need it. Hence, the DR drill, the testing feature for being able to test your application and your recovery process upfront is very critical. You don't want to go into a disaster recovery situation where you have not even tried it. You have not tested your DR drill. Now, with not having a features like test failover, people used to wait for a year to do the DR drill, and by the time the actual disaster comes, the configuration of application would have changed, and they were not able to successfully do the failovers. The concept of test failover, similar to what we showed in test migration, allows you to test application as many times without having impact in a simplified manner. And lastly, I chose my primary data center with a conscious choice that this is the best data center for my application. Maybe because of latency, maybe because of performance, maybe because of closeness to my data center. Hence, in a steady state, I always want to come back to that data center and run my application. Now, you would see enough solutions out in the market which actually do a one-way street. It's a Hotel California there. You go in, you're stuck there. Their failback process would be really, really cumbersome. In fact, our process about year and a half back for some of our scenarios were not there. But we believe the failback process needs to be simplified and significant enough, similar to our failover process, how it happens in the forward direction. It should be happening in the reverse direction as well. So with these 4 needs, I started to plan this scenario, and this is how we will go further ahead. Before we look into ASR and the demo of the ASR, I would want to highlight what people are doing today for their DR strategies. Topmost, people think they can do active-active. Yes, great technology. If you have a requirement where you want to run out of 2 data centers, you have customers from 2 data centers coming in, this is the right thing to do. But it incurs cost. Not all applications work with this. Especially the traditional line of business application, there are customers who have spent years, given contracts, hire vendors to get it done, and unsuccessfully completed the project and moved back to say they cannot convert into active-active. By definition of a lot of application, active-active is not possible. Second, as Microsoft, we started to provide RA-GRS and GRS. The intent of these capabilities was to provide data availability, purely data availability. You can replicate and have the data available so that you can restore your data, you don't lose your data. They were never meant to be a DR process. But because you have a data replication, people started to build DR on it. But when they built the DR, they realized the biggest pain point they hit is, 1, the RTO is very high, because you are moving the complete data, bringing up, capturing the configuration, and attaching it to the VHT. Second, this did not provide you an application consistency between multiple blobs. So if your VM has 2 VHTs, then these 2 VHTs being used by RA-GRS or a GRS mechanism will be inconsistent. Your application may not come up. Third, there are some third-party solutions which are selling in-guest replication, where you need to run applications on both the sides. You will actually incur a full running deployment on the secondary side, which takes away your cost into 2 times. So that's the third solution. Now let me go back and show you guys the demo for our upcoming scenario. And I'm really thrilled to do this, because this has taken the simplification to the next level. I have these virtual machines. I'm on a virtual machines tab, running the 4 virtual machines. And I want to protect my SharePoint VM. I click on the virtual machine. It opens up. As you can see, the location of this virtual machine is East Asia. And you would see a site recovery tab right there in the virtual machine settings. I click on that tab to see what does it do. Basically, at this point of time, what we are doing is we are reading your primary configuration, suggesting you a nearest target region where you can replicate, and also suggesting you what all constructs you need to create, and by default we will create for you, but what all constructs you would need to be having failover of these virtual machines. Like if your VM is in a resource group, we will give you a target resource group. If it was in an availability SAT, we will create an availability SAT. Storage account where your VHDs are coming from, we will create the storage account. Similarly, creating the virtual network. The replication settings is more of a ASR settings which we need to set up your replications, so we are creating it on your behalf. Now, if I'm satisfied with all of these, I just need to press an OK. We will trigger the deployment. There will be an ARM template which will go create all your resources. So it validates whether these resources are eligible and creates them, and then starts the protection. What you will see in this particular demo, in about a minute's time, I've been able to review my application, review my settings, and also protect the virtual machines and move on to my next work. So our templates are running in the background. So deployment for that same one is started. Once the deployment for all your resources gets complete, we will start the deployment for your protection as well. So we'll just give it a minute. In fact, we can come back to this later, and let me show you a virtual machine which is actually protected. So this is a virtual machine I protected earlier, right? So same tab, same place. When I come back, I'm able to see my replication health. I'm able to see that this machine is going and replicating into a target location of Southeast Asia. It is going into a resource group, a particular storage account, and current replication health is good. Now, if I have to do the test failover of this particular application, it's very simple, same steps. Right here, I can click the button. It will tell me that your failover direction is from East Asia to Southeast Asia. You can go in point in time history. So if you want to go into custom and select a particular point in time, you have a complete journal, so you can go in back in time, which will provide you protection against ransomware or viruses kind of a scenarios. Or if you want to bring up the latest one, you can just bring the latest point in time and select just the network for that one and press OK. Now, this virtual machine will go and do the test failover. And I've done a bunch of time the test failover of this virtual machine. In fact, if time permits, I will be able to show you. Because there is no conversion involved, your virtual machine is going to come in within 2 minutes time frame on your secondary data center, and we will be able to see that. We'll come back and take a look at this virtual machine, and let's talk a little bit more about the DR scenario. So what did we see? Did you guys have to prepare any DR infrastructure? Was there any component which was required to be pre-created? No. This truly, truly simplifies. The day I have an intent of starting my protection, I can just come and do it. We had an automated protection and replication for it, just single click of button, or you can do it through PowerShell commandlets of ARM templates. The RPO and RTO, I talked about RTO of being like in 2 minutes I'm bringing up your virtual machine, so your RTO is pretty good, but even the RPO is in seconds. Because we have the pipe between our Azure data centers, we have these fat pipes going Microsoft bandwidth, which we'll be using for it. So you really don't need to even plan your network infrastructure. Everything is already being planned and maintained by Microsoft for you. The no impact DR drill and recovery plan and failback support, I've talked about it in the previous scenarios as well, and they will come in this scenarios as is. So let's look at it from other technologies which we were talking about earlier, and how does site recovery really improves your experience. So in active, and third-party deployments, because you were running additional VMs, you were paying a lot of dollars. Your cost was very high. But in ASR, no additional infrastructure. The VM is only replicating into a storage account and coming up when the VM needs to come up at the time of failover. So this significantly reduces your cost. Simplification, I don't need to speak about it. I showcased you how easy it was to protect and fail over your application. None of the scenarios today can support DR drills, the test failover. This is the only support you will get with the scenario like site recovery which we have built. We have application consistency. In fact, we have application consistency across VMs as well. The capability which used to only come with SAN-based replication, where you had LUN-level replication allowing you multi-VM consistency, now that is enabled even in ASR by default. So you can have multiple virtual machines and have consistency across the virtual machines to get an application consistency. The RTO and RPO, yes, active will give you a better RTO because it's always running. But apart from that, we are much better than other scenarios in this. So this was about VMs. Let's also take a look at what does an application level DR would mean. How is it a little bit different from your on-premise, and how does ASR is going to help you with that? So this is a typical application architecture. I'm showing you a SharePoint architecture, but this would relate to any 3-tier or any multi-tier application. You have a public endpoint at the top. Behind that, there's a load balancer which is serving the web front ends. Then I have another load balancer in front of my app tier, which is doing the processing of it. And finally, SQL tier. It could be a SQL always on with a watcher, or a SQL tier, but having load balancers. All the VMs at each tiers are part of an availability set and is set up their VHD on a storage account. The whole application is part of a VNet, and the VM NICs are attached to that VNet with a particular private IP. So when you're thinking about DR of this application, what are you thinking? You're still thinking RTO, RPO, because application is critical to bring up. But now you have started to think about network connectivity. When I say network connectivity, you think about IPs, you think about virtual network, you think about load balancers, you think about public IPs. So a lot of scenarios to play with. Then, as we were talking about earlier, application may have boot order dependencies or spatial instructions which is needed for applications to come up. So then, as you think about application DR, you start thinking about application dependencies and boot order. Now let's go back to ASR and see how would I do in IaaS VMs an application level failover or application level protection. Quickly switching to my machines. And at this point of time, let's first refresh the machine nav, and you would see the VM which I failed over now is already up and running. I think I've been talking just for 5 minutes, but I can show you the job as well, which just took 2 minutes. But let's look at the application failover. So for an application level failover, you cannot be doing it from a VM. You need to go back and look into the ASR vault-based experience. So you go into the ASR vault. I would start with the protection of an application this time. So I click on the plus replicate. It opens. It tells me what's my source. My source is Azure because we support on-premise as well. So I'm giving the source as Azure. The next input is asking which region. Which region do you want the data from, right? So the VM is running in East Asia, so I will use East Asia. And it's an ARM VM, Resource Manager VM. I select that. Then I get an option of choosing the SQL machines or my virtual machines. So in this case, I have 3 machines which is running in AppRG. I will just select them and say, OK. Very similar to what we have done or seen in the past. We will allow you to choose the region. We will auto-populate region, network, resource group, availability set, target storage, and cache storage, which is required for the whole scenario to work by ourselves. You don't need to plan, but if you are an enterprise, you want to manage it yourself, you want to provide me input, yeah, I want to connect to some XYZ network, fine, you have a choice. You can go create the network, come back, and provide me the network. Otherwise, we can help you with all of those planning. Again, kick, I'm deploying all of these resources. They will get deployed in the Southeast Asia region and come up for your application. The last step, once these resources are created, is to provide you a replication policy. What is a replication policy? It's basically a small setting which talks about what frequency do I need to send the data, at what frequency do I need to get the application consistent snapshot, and if I need a multi-VM consistency, can I get that multi-VM consistency? So we'll let it run for a minute and let the resources complete. Meantime, let me also talk about how is this cache storage helping you here. When we are sending the data, we are not sending the data directly into the recovery side. We want the data to be consistent, but we don't want the production side impact. So we created a cache on the source side where each VM will send their writes, and our service will pick the writes from that storage account and send it across. So this allows you to not have a production impact on your source side, but still have a good replication frequency in order of seconds or minutes, and be done with that. So I've already created a policy here. It asks me what is my RPO threshold. We are a continuous data replication, so we'll send it as fast as we can, but the RPO threshold is where you will get alerted. What's your recovery point? How much history do you need? And what's your app consistency? If you want to create your own, you can create a new one as well. But let's just kick this off. So once this all inputs are done, we have started the protection of this application, and your application is protected. Now, once the application is protected, you want to do the recovery of it. Now, practically, we have created the environment for you. But now what we will do is show you a recovery plan for a ISVM. So very similar to what we has seen earlier, right? Very similar. Nothing we need to do. Groupa VMs, based on the tiers, SharePoint has SQL, app, and web tier. And what I have introduced as post-step as attaching it to the load balancers assigned to them. And in the web tier, I'm doing the load balancer assignment along with the IP. So practically, the network we have taken as an input, so we have attached to it. The NICs are created, VM config is created, your networks are attached, and availability sets are attached. All you need to do is assign that network to a load balancer, and your application is back up and running in the same format as it was running earlier. We are not stopping there. We want to make it much simpler for you guys. Do you think something is missing when you're thinking about DR still? Is there something else you would want us to replicate or something else you want us to manage? Anything? Network connection tables, okay. Anything else? Okay, so what we are starting with, and sorry, you wanted to? So we actually covered all of those into another scenario. This is very focused of moving into Azure IaaS, not just the complete. I will take questions on ASR a little later. Okay. So the first thing we have started to do is around user management, your configuration sync. You would all set up some RBAC rules, policies to make sure that the applications are still restricted to the folks who need access for. We will ensure that we will replicate that, and the virtual machines which are coming in the replicated environment also follow the same RBAC policies. Configuration syncs. If I change my compute size, if I add some tags into it, we will replicate that. And these are just examples. These are not the exhaustive list. But the idea behind communicating there is you would have your management concepts, which will be managing your virtual machines, And when you replicate and bring up the environment, these concepts needs to stay. So we are trying to make not just the DR simple, but the DR management also equally simple. We are providing automation support. We will publish ARM templates with default ARM templates with DR protection, but also have API and PowerShell for you to configure it, manage it automatically, or through your scripts yourself. And we will have rich monitoring dashboard. Again, integrated with our OMS solution, where we will have rich dashboard monitoring, providing you replication health, ability to analyze your errors if there are any, and get alerts if something has went wrong. So overall, your complete DR management would be given you as a bundle by OMS. So with this, I would like to recap what we saw for an application failover. So your application was a VNet with a public IP and a load balancer on web tier, which is in a vulnerability set, attached to a storage account. Behind that, I had another load balancer and 2 app tiers, which are there for processing. And then behind that, I had a SQL servers, which are processing the database and attached to another storage account. As we protect, we create the recovery side environment. So all of these things can be created using ASR in advance. So you will get your network, target network, you will get your public IP, you will get your load balancers, you will get your availability set. When you start replicating, you would have a cache storage account. The data from your VMs would start flowing into this cache storage account and eventually transferred into the target ASR storage accounts or managed for your DR storage account. That's where you are getting a continuous replication. In an event of disaster, when your primary site is not available, you can trigger a failover, and the failover process will bring up the virtual machines in the right availability set attached to the right network, and you can just associate load balancers. And we will actually enhance that even further to have load balancer capabilities also coming in. But practically, with a single click, now your application is up and running on the recovery side. With this, I actually conclude my presentation, and if there are any questions around this scenario, I'm happy to take. I've put up the slide for all the OMS sessions which are going through. We are on the Thursday morning session. We have around 6 sessions following these on today and tomorrow. And we have some theater and the system center sessions also, which would be interested for you guys. But any questions? Yes, please. So at this point of time, I'm not in a place where I can share the timelines for you. I've showcased the demo to you already, so you can pretty much assume that this is just close to the coming out of the door. Can you be a little louder, please? Mm-hmm. Sure. So the question here is, do we have a migration tool for moving from Classic to ARM? I want to move my workloads running in Classic to ARM. So Azure Site Recovery has not released that scenario or capabilities. Azure IS team has themselves built some solutions around it. That's the Microsoft suggested way of doing those migrations. I'm going to be here for another 5-10 minutes if there are any other questions. People who are leaving, thank you so much for attending the session. These are some of the resources. And please do give us feedback. Thank you. Yes, please.